Welcome to How to Garden. Give me a minute here. Checking on my settings, making sure things are working properly. All right. Everything seems to be working okay. So it's time for us to start our fall vegetable gardens down here in Florida. You should have, at this point, started a lot of your vegetables in starter cells. You generally want to start those 4 to 6 weeks before you plan on planting, depending on what they are. I have some stuff that is already in ground. Went in ground the last couple of days. I have a few things that'll go to ground during this week. But I also have a few things that won't be going into the ground for another 2 to 3 weeks. I'll be waiting a little bit on my tomatoes, probably 2 to 3 weeks. But I put squash, pumpkins, beans, and I'll be putting cucumbers in probably this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon. I'm hardening a lot of them off. If you don't know how to harden things off, all you do is sit them out in the sun for a couple of hours the first day, and then a couple hours longer the second day, and you increase it until you can just leave them in the sun. That way they don't get sunburned. So it's still quite hot here, and the sun's still pretty intense. So that's basically what I'm up to right now. Well, any luck at all, I will be preparing at least 2 new beds this year, and I've still got to clear out my main vegetable bed. So hopefully I'll be able to get that done. The heat's a big issue at this time. So it's, maybe an hour or 2 in the afternoon that I'm able to go outside and do that type of thing. More or less trying to stay out of the heat. And it is starting to feel a little cooler in the early evening, right before sunset. I think it was 79 yesterday at 7:30, where it was like just a week ago, still in the upper 80s at 7:30. Hi, Howie, how you doing? Glad to have you come in. How's it going up there in Canada? What are you planning on doing for a fall garden up there? Down here, like I was just saying, I'm starting to put in my warm season stuff. I've got squash and some beans in. A little cold this morning, Howie. Wow, see, it's not even faintly chilly. It's still quite hot. Hi, Paul at Dutch Off-Grid Homesteading. Good to see ya. There you go, Howie. I made you a moderator, since none of my other moderators are in here right now. Paul, I'm doing pretty good. I'm supposed to be filming outside today, and I'm not really able to do that because the power company's here tearing up my front yard and making a lot of noise. So being able to film outside this morning was not even faintly close to being able to happen. There's just way too much noise. So instead of filming, I decided I'd go live and see who's up. Paul, I'm doing pretty good. Getting ready for my fall season, which is my main veggie season. Hi, Abby. How are you doing? And Farm and Havoc, welcome in. And if you guys don't know each other, please go meet each other and join each other's channels. Howie, you're welcome to drop anybody's link if you'd like. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm pretty good, Abby. I'm getting ready to do all my fall gardening, and I've got one new bed that I just put in. It's got some squash in it and some beans. Not a whole lot. It's only let's see, that's an 8-foot by 4-foot bed. And I'll be staggering in more stuff as the season goes along, but it's still too hot for some of the stuff I want to put in there. Like, it's entirely too hot for me to do any of the brassicas, although I need to go ahead and get those started in starter cells so that they'll be ready in about a month and a half when it's time for me to put those in. For us down here in Florida, this is the beginning of our vegetable season. It goes from September until the end of December. And then again, the first week of March until right around mid-June. It gets too hot and the sun's too intense. Generally speaking, it ends with the beginning of whenever the seasonal rains start, because then it gets really hot and really humid and everything gets diseases and dies. That's just kind of how it is here in Florida. But then we get to switch to doing other things like tropicals. So, it's a catch-22. Your normal vegetables that everybody's used to growing ends. But then I can start growing things like winged beans. I've got a black lima bean that does really well. I mean, really, really well through our summer. I can do African greater yams during the summer. I can do African potato mint during the summer. Most herbs die mid-June. Just it gets so hot it kills everything, with the exception of Cuban oregano. You can get certain types of rosemary to grow if you put them in the shade. So we also get ginger starts coming up mid-May to June. So that's our ginger season. Turmeric. Unfortunately, my turmeric did not come back up this year, and I'm going to have to go to the local Asian grocery store and go get some more. So it came up every year for 5 years, and this year, nothing, just gone. Yeah, shade cloth helps a lot. Unfortunately, here with the shade cloth, my city itself, they don't like anything they consider structure. So if I put up poles for shade cloth, they'll come by and they'll fine me for having the shade cloth. So I kind of got to grow my shade. They don't have a problem with trees for the most part. There are several city ordinances that a tree here must be at least 3 inches in diameter at the base, or they might come by and tell you to cut it down, which kind of sucks. Generally speaking, they've left me alone on that because they can't see what I'm doing due to the woods on either side of me. Unfortunately, one of those lots is going to be bulldozed within the next few months, and they're going to build a brand new house next door, which I'm really unhappy about because I've been trying to buy that lot for 6 years. And the guy's prices have just been all over the place and completely crazy. The going rate right now for a standard lot in my city is around $12,000. When I first went to him, it was around 6,000, and at that time he was asking 80,000. A morning gardener was brought to court for growing veggies. Yeah. Fortunately, I don't have to worry about that here in Florida anymore. It could get kind of sketchy with the way the laws were, but they passed a law last year allowing you to grow vegetables and food anywhere on your property, whether it's your front yard, your backyard, side yards. It doesn't matter anymore. And that's because there was a couple down in the Miami area whose backyard was very, very shaded and was not appropriate for them to be able to grow veggies. So they had a vegetable garden for 17 years in their front yard. Elderly couple. They grew veggies during the winter every year, and then they covered it up during the summer like we do down here. We tend to put something over it to just kind of solarize during the summer so that we don't have problems later. And somebody that had moved in their neighborhood started calling and complaining to code enforcement. Code enforcement came by, saw what they were doing, forced them to stop, fined them something like $158,000 or $59,000 for growing veggies in their front yard. And the elderly couple, they sued. And they lost completely in court. Now, our governor stepped up and said, no, this isn't right. You can't tell people they can't grow food in their yard. And he got enough support that he was able to write a law and pass it here in Florida that made it part of our Constitution that you can grow food on your property. They specified vegetable gardening, but they've kind of extended it. As long as it is something that is producing food, you can grow it, and as long as it's not going across your property line. With the fruit trees, if they go across your property line onto somebody else's property, once it crosses that property line, they can do whatever they want with what crosses that property line. So if they don't like the branches hanging over, they can just cut it off. They don't even have to ask you. And that applies to all trees. That's good, Howie. They regulate a lot of other things here. I mean, they actually passed the law in my community that if there is not an ordinance governing what you are doing on your property, it is illegal until they write an ordinance to decide whether or not it's legal. So if you're doing something, there's no ordinance, therefore it should be legal. Not anymore. They passed this law about 5-6 years ago. That caused several problems here in this immediate area with people that had backyard chickens, because there had been no ordinance for backyard chickens. And code enforcement was citing people for having chickens. Now there's a new ordinance. It's been on the books for 4 years. You're allowed to have 4 hens, no roosters, in a approved coop. You got to go down, you got to apply to get permission to have chickens. You got to build a coop that meets their specifications. They come in, they inspect it, just like if you were building a house, but it's code enforcement, not the building department. Cost $45 to have them come inspect it. And then because it's on your property, they have the right at any time to come back onto the property to make sure that it is still compliant with the code and that they're being properly taken care of. So it's kind of catch-22 on chickens here. You're allowed to have them, providing you give away permission for them to enter your property without your knowledge or any legitimate reason. They have been using that as a excuse to inspect people's property without permission and to be able to go in places they normally would not be able to access. So that's something that's probably going to have to be addressed here locally before too long. So far, they haven't done it to somebody that happens to have a lot of money and time to be able to sue them. That's really what that comes down to, is people need to be able to, I mean, seriously, you're looking at $10,000 just to get a lawyer. So is 4 chickens worth $10,000 and your right to privacy? So, you know, these things, that's what's going on. Hi, The Best Life. Welcome in. And Mennonette Farmhouse, welcome in. Thanks for coming. Very much appreciated. Let's see. Howie says no clotheslines, no RV, no boat, no guns. Only house patrons in the number that is your family living at my house. All right. I'm allowed the clotheslines. RVs, boats, and things like that must be kept in the backyard, or a pre-made like pad on the side yard that is behind the front of the house. They have a law here for utility trailers, RVs, boats, things like that they call trailer forward. I actually got cited by this one 4 days after I bought this house. While I was in the process of moving into this house, code enforcement drove right up into my driveway and cited me for having my utility trailer hooked up to my truck in the front yard. That was quite a bit of fun, because suddenly I had this guy demanding that to know why I have a trailer hooked up to my truck in my front yard. Yeah, that's true, Minonette. That really, there is an overall move toward that way. Simple fact of the matter is, if you control the food, then you'll control the people. So, you know, there are certain things, you know, fortunately they have passed a law here in Florida making it where you can grow any type of edible. There are some edibles they have made illegal here. Legally speaking, the African yams that I grow are considered a invasive species. Not really invasive, but they have a cousin that is very invasive, and that's air potatoes. Now, the air potatoes are everywhere. And those air potatoes, they're unbelievably invasive. They're a close cousin to the African greater yams. So when they passed the law dealing with the air potatoes and making them illegal and classifying them as highly invasive, they classified the African yams as highly invasive because they don't know the difference. Thing is, with the air potatoes, those were actually brought here by the government back in the 1930s and brought to the University of Florida for research. They brought a poisonous variety that they decided they wanted to check to see if there was any medical uses for. What type of chemicals does this plant produce that might be useful? Turned out they weren't terribly useful for anything in medical back in that day, and to my knowledge, it still isn't. But the University of Florida lost control of them, and they are everywhere. Now the University of Florida has brought in a couple different funguses that attack it, as well as a beetle, and release those out into the wild to try to deal with the situation. So now we get these little beetles and it's the beetles that carry the fungus that attack these plants, and they're kind of like squash borers. They bore right into the stem, and because they carry these funguses, then it spreads. And the vinyl actually just turned to goo. It's really weird. It'll turn black and then turn to goo, and all the air potatoes that were on it, they turn to goo and just fall on the ground. And so far, these pests haven't crossed over to the African yams, but there's some serious concern that might be an issue. Not really sure why they decided to bring that. I mean, they had it where they were getting it under control pretty well by sponsoring programs with different youth groups where they'd send the kids into the woods, and every bucket of the air potatoes that they brought out, they'd give them $1. And whole communities going in and just doing that every year. And that was eradicating them really well. And then they brought these in and released it, and they quit that program instead. Let's see, who just came in? Peter, how you doing, Peter? Welcome in. So, it's fall gardening time here, and I'm really having a hard time finding a good manure source this year. Many of you probably already know that manures here in the United States are often contaminated with broadleaf herbicides, and we don't want that in our garden. So if you did know that, you need to test it. And testing, it's easy. You just take a sample and get some beans, get them growing, start them off with something else, and then plant them. And if they get all really crinkly looking or outright die, don't use the composted manure. Now, this has been a bit of an issue for me for a few years. I got hit by that about 7 years ago, and where I had originally planned on having my vegetable garden, I don't grow anything there now. But I have been getting a decent amount. We're talking 200-300 gallons, big pots I take over to this one horse farm for the last few years. And this year, for some reason, she's not active. She usually posts online when she has it. There's another gentleman I've gotten it from. He had his entire field sprayed to get rid of the weeds that were in the grass, because he was worried about his horses being poisoned by what was growing. Found out later that the real reason he did that was because he's part of a breeding program for the horses, and that they were pushing on him that he had to have it sprayed if he wanted to be part of that program. And since his livelihood does directly associate with him being able to stud out his horses, it's kind of a bit of an issue. You have a good one, Howie. Be safe, and I hope your appointment goes well. Now, that's been a bit of an issue. This year, I don't have any manures, and I don't really have enough plants that are nitrogen fixers to get a good amount of nitrogen in the soil this year. So I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do with that. Chances are I'm probably just going to take my cast net and go get a bunch of mullet for the garden. So, that's a trick I've used many times, and I plant a lot of my stuff with fish But I usually also have the manures, and that kind of balances things out. I just have not been able to access them this year. I could probably get some cow manure if I went out to one of the local ranches here, but I'm worried that they might be using a fungicide out on that property, since that particular, well, there's really only one good cattle farm around here. It's huge. There's technically 6, but it's all the same family. And they use a lot of fungicides because they were having problems with people coming onto their property to look for hallucinogenic mushrooms. So they have a red salt-like fungicide that they spread all over their fields. And I'm kind of worried about bringing in anything that might contain that fungicide, since I'm trying to build a good fungal network in my system. The last thing I want to do is wipe it out after years of dumping huge amounts of compost and wood chips and everything else to build my soil here. So I kind of decided not to go with that. There is one gentleman I know that does not do that at all. He's only got maybe 5 or 6 cows, but he also uses most of his horse manure for his own food forest. So I don't really want to take away from his, especially considering he's been very generous and has given me a significant amount of plants and even a few fungal compounds that he's made for his own stuff. Best of life. You get horse compost from your neighbor, that's good. Make sure you test that horse compost every year to make sure it doesn't have broadleaf herbicides in it. Even if he doesn't spray his fields, any imported hay might have it. I might be able to ask him. Right now is kind of a bad time to get in touch with him. He's got a lot going on. He's a doctor, and he's kind of busy right now, so I don't really want to bother the guy. It's kind of rude, especially considering we've had a massive influx of COVID in this area, and he's kind of busy dealing with that, so I don't really want to bother him. Oh, that's awesome, and that you got some cow manure. One source I might be able to use for some manures is my oldest daughter has some pigeons. So I might be able to go scrape the pigeon cage and maybe get a few gallons of pigeon manure. That'd probably help. I hadn't thought about that. So what issues is anybody having with doing their gardens? My main issue right now is the heat. The heat will start to taper off in the next few weeks with any luck at all. It's Florida, so it might be November before it cools down enough to get certain things established. Weekend RVing, hello and welcome to the stream. Thank you for coming. These manures are going to be a big issue for me this year, or just basically getting the excess nitrogen that I need. Another problem I just had to deal with, a lot of my starts starting to get ready to put them in. I walk over, a bunch of them have been eaten. This happened last year too. Army worms are bad this year. They were really bad last year. So I had to take care of that problem. That's always fun to go outside and find a couple thousand army worms munching on your new starts. Mexican beetles, yellow fuzzy bugs. I am not familiar with those ones. We do not have those ones here. We got a lot of things that eat everything here, but I don't have any Mexican beetles that I know of. Paul, you don't have your infrastructure ready yet? It's a good time, if you don't have your infrastructure ready, to go ahead and start building soil in the area where you plan on having it. Fall leaves, compost, whatever you can get. Just start putting it over in that area. Hi, Crystal. Welcome in. Thanks for coming. Peter, I take it you're in the southern hemisphere. Peter, there are other things other than shade cloth that you can use to accomplish that. One of the things that I've done here, because it kind of gets questionable about putting things up like that, but they won't question things that look like a pavilion, strangely enough, which is an actual structure. So at one point for a while, when I was in another nearby city, I had put up some 4x4 posts, and then I framed it in with 2x4 across the top, and then I just put lattice across the top of that, and then I put regular screen for like doors and windows, 2 layers of it across that, and 2 layers all the way around, and I made a shade house for orchids. That worked very, very well. I would have preferred to have used shade cloth, but at that time it was entirely too expensive for me to be able to do. It was, I think it was $350 here locally for a 5x10 sheet of shade cloth. It's come down a bit, but now we're having trouble getting ones that are square. Now, whenever you find shade cloth here that's actually for sale, they're big triangle pieces. For some reason, the triangles have become popular with putting them up around the restaurants here to create little shaded areas for people to be able to sit under and eat outside. Because of that, getting the square pieces has become difficult because everybody wants to sell the triangle pieces because that's more likely to be bought. Although, honestly, if you wanted a triangle, couldn't you buy a square piece and cut it and just have 2 triangles? But, you know, it is what it is. Hey, Timber Hills, broke a rib. That's not good, bro. What'd you do? Were you out in the woods hunting and fall down, broke your rib? And also, welcome in, Timber Hills. Thanks for coming. And Noni May, thank you very much for coming. It's good to see you. Peter, 250 acres is like my dream property. I honestly would have no idea how happy I would be to have 250 acres. And the things I would set up and systems I would set up to grow on 250 acres, I would be beside myself happy. I'd be digging swales all over the place. I'd be changing the contour to catch all that water. I'd be building everything. I would just be beside myself happy with 250 acres. I'd have ponds. I'd have artificial streams that I created. Depending on where it was, I'd probably put in artesian wells that I could turn on and off as necessary. I'd be planting in guilds, but in very, very large, where there'd be 50 trees in a guild. I'd be beside myself with 250 acres. There'd be so much food coming out of there. Probably take me 10 years to get it all set up, but I'd be set. My kids would be set for life. We wouldn't have to buy much of anything. Of course, they'd have to learn some new skills, and I'd probably have an issue with it. See, right now, we have a lot of pets. I end up with a lot more pets. I think last I checked, we had 22 pets. Might be more. So honestly, 20-25 acres would work for me, because then I'd be able to have sheep, I'd be able to have goats, I'd be able to have, maybe a milking cow or two. I would definitely set aside a chunk of it just for forestry. Raised beds. I could have entirely too much fun with 20-25 acres. As it is now, I have 0.24 acres, which is heavily, there is about 1/5 of it that I can't access at all. Well, I can access it, I just can't really use it. Back behind my back fence, that is part of the St. Johns River water management system, which means I can't plant anything out there. I can't. It's grass going down to a canal. I can't actually access the water there. Now, that canal used to be full of water and used to be able to go back there and fish in it. But they were doing a water restoration project to the west of me, and when they opened up the floodgates to let the water from here into there, I'm now at the very high end, and generally speaking, during the wet season, I got 2 feet, maybe 3 feet of water, unless a hurricane's coming through, then it fills up real quick. But during the dry season, you can just walk right across. So basically, it's a place where turtles congregate, and it's a wildlife corridor. Since that area actually goes all the way out to the restored area, and that restored area connects to a wildlife corridor that they have created that goes all throughout Central Florida. St. John's Wildlife Corridor, which goes over and connects with the Kissimmee River Wildlife Corridor, and before too long, we're going to have bears, which are mostly over in Ocala, but they now have free passage where they'll be able to go through. As it is now, I've had turkeys go through. I've seen a deer. I've got a serious raccoon problem. 3 times now I've seen coyotes. I heard one night I was out hearing a cat just scream. Hi, Hapsters. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Timber Hill. I greatly appreciate it. The sounds I was hearing, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm hearing what sounds just a cat screaming like something, like it's being murdered. And I have 3 cats, and one of them likes to be outside, so I got up. I thought it was him. And I'm checking. I'm not seeing my cat in the house, so I go outside, out there with a flashlight. Thanks, Timberhill. Much appreciated. And I could hear this cat screaming behind my house. Well, to get back behind the fence, I got to walk through the empty lot next door. So I had the gates in the back screwed shut from the inside because I was having a problem with people coming in my backyard at night. So I cut off their route. I walk around back there and I shine a light down the canal, and here comes 5 or 6 coyotes, and one of them's got a cat in its mouth. I freaked out. I thought it was my cat. And then I, was able to get the light on it and realize it wasn't my cat. But still, here he was, one of my neighbor's cats, caught and being carried off by the coyotes. Came in about 10 minutes later. The cat that I thought might be outside, because I spent a good amount of time trying to find him outside. Yeah, he's sleeping on the couch. I completely missed him. I do believe, Timberhill, that is 11:12. Yeah, that's what time it is here, too. Dutch, 5:02 a.m. I do not remember where you are, Paul. Excuse me. Bear with me a minute. I got to lean forward and get a bottle of water. Wish I could actually carry this thing over and show you all the veggie starts I got going. But this laptop has to actually be hooked up to a wire for the internet to work, which is fun. The Wi-Fi on it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And I haven't figured out why, because sometimes I have Wi-Fi and sometimes I don't. Holland. I've always wanted to go to Holland. Peter, you're Australian East Coast. So maybe the Melbourne area? I don't really know the layout of Melbourne or Australia all that well. Definitely somewhere I've always wanted to go, but really hasn't been able to. Timberhill, you're in Maryland. That's where my father's family is originally from, is the Maryland area. I spent a decent amount of time in Maryland a couple of times. Chesapeake is huge. You can't even see across that thing. Yeah, the best life. You're not really going to have much of a fall season in Montana. I can definitely see that. See, while you guys are wrapping down, we're coming out of essentially what is our winter, because the summer, if you're not growing tropicals, you ain't growing anything at all. And a lot of people that move down here never quite figure that out and continue planting like they would have up north. After a few years, they usually give up and decide it's impossible to grow things in Florida. It's a real shame they don't bother to do any research and find out what our planting schedule is. I really think here in the places where they sell all the stuff that the planting schedule ought to just be posted. That would help a great deal. But they're too busy selling plants that won't grow in this area to people in the spring because they don't know any better. So, it's a catch-22. It'd probably end up selling a lot more if they sold it at the appropriate time and had that posted so that people could see what the planting schedule is. And Crystal, yeah, you're in Kansas. You were just in Chicago the other day. I know you don't live there, but I know you were visiting there. Thousand miles north of Melbourne. So you're in the subtropics, if I remember how it works on your for you there, Peter. You should be in the subtropic zone, the rainforested area. So you're probably a very similar climate to me. I'm subtropical Florida. Here it's zone 9B, 10A, because I'm right at the border between the two. You go 2 blocks east and it's officially 10A. It's all right, Timber Hill. Oh, Peter, you're inland, so you're hot and dry. Yeah. I don't have a lot of experience growing in that particular climate. I know a lot of people that do. And honestly, if the rains stopped here, we'd be a desert in a year. There's no water retention in our soil whatsoever. It's 99.9% quartz sand. Best of life, you're in 4B. See, to me, that's the Great White North. That's cold. See, 4B, you're looking at probably around minus 40 at your coldest. In Timber Hill, you get hummingbird nectar. You don't require the red dye. The red dye is actually bad for hummingbirds. So if you can avoid adding the red, that'd be good. And you got to watch and make sure it doesn't ferment because it can ferment fast. Let's see. I'm glad you brought that up. Our hummingbird season should begin in the next few weeks. I need to get my feeders up for them. They migrate through here. They usually come in the second to third week of September. And if you want them to stick around, they've got to actually have food. I've got plenty of plants they might like, but the feeders tend to keep them around longer than the flowers. Peter and swallows. Man, the swallows are great. Even here in the subtropics. I didn't do it on this lot, but I've done it on other lots for people. One of my friends, he got so carried away with his swallows that he dug right into our water table. So our water table during summer is 3 to 5 feet below the surface. He got really carried away, and during the dry season, he dug 10-foot swallows all the way around his property. During the wet season, it's a continuous water ditch. Uh, when you get into more towards the center of the state here in Florida, you get up into the sand hills where they're getting about 150 feet above the water table. And those swalls start to become really important to put water into the ground there. So, it's very hilly. You put your swalls in on contour, and you put all your sand on the south side, and you plant. And the spoil, keep it in place. One of the things a lot of people over there do is they actually put a good foot or two of mulch across the bottom of their swall. It starts to build soil down there, so it builds up over time. They end up digging it back out, which is kind of downside to it. But the upside to it is it holds some of the water on the surface. It slows down how fast it trickles in because that sand is, it's crazy. It's just gone. We can get 6 inches of rain. You'll look outside and there's puddles. You can go inside and make a cup of coffee, come back out, puddles are gone. It percolates through that sand that fast. So some of the things you can do when you're putting in those systems here is you can line the bottom of it with a little bit of clay, which is kind of difficult to source here. Or you can put in a foot or two of mulch at the bottom, and that mulch will suck up the water and hold it there. And the trees that you have planted in the spoil running down the side will put roots in right into that compost and make all the difference in the world here. A lot of people they'll mulch immediately around the trees. They won't do a nice blanket mulch. There's a real grass culture here that sucks. You are legally required to have a lawn. I hate it. But as far as the front yards go, unless you've got it tore up for vegetable gardening, you're legally required to have a lawn. They have laws for ground cover. It must be covered. Rice surprisingly does not do well in Florida. There's been a decent amount of research, Peter, where they brought in all kinds of different rice out of Asia, trying to find a variety that does well here. You would think it might. We got several major river systems that flood annually and then drop down. And it'd be a great place to grow rice. But it doesn't do well here. And they've tried the highland rice here. The University of Florida spent several $1 million doing research to see if rice could grow here. And they found 3 varieties that do poorly and no varieties that do well. Not sure whether or not that research is still going. Now, the wild rice, we've got 5 different varieties of wild rice that occur naturally in the swamps here. Most people don't realize it's here. But there are 5 different varieties that occur naturally, mostly up in the Panhandle, about 300 miles northwest of me. There are a couple that do okay in South Florida, down in the Everglades, so I'm sure there's probably some in the waterways here. I might just never have noticed it. Most of those areas are managed wetlands, and you're not really allowed to go out there and harvest anything like that, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, because otherwise the places would get pretty tore up. There's a wildlife management area just to the west of me that about 5 years ago, they put out a thing where they were begging people to come in and deal with the pig problem. There was a massive pig problem out there. There was something like 10,000 pigs in that wildlife management area. So during hunting season, they put out a thing that you didn't need a hunting license to be out there to hunt pig. You were allowed to come hunt pig day or night, which is abnormal here. You're not allowed to hunt at night unless you're on private land and only certain things. On public land, you can't hunt at night. They were allowing that. They were allowing ATVs in, which they normally do not allow. That place was so tore up by the end of the season that they haven't done it since. Instead, they have a guy in a helicopter fly around and shoot pigs from the air. Because the place was so tore up, they don't want it to be anything like that anymore. They'd rather pay to have a guy fly around and shoot them from the air. It's kind of unsportsmanship-like. The Hapsters, your dad used to grow rice. See, that's something they really need to do, is actually bring people here if they want to actually reboot rice or have rice as an industry in Florida. They need to bring people here that are used to growing rice. There used to be a good rice industry in the United States, in the Louisiana, on the Mississippi, and around the Chesapeake, and in South Carolina. There used to be a golden rice that was well known in the Carolina industry, and there's still rice grown in that area today. But for the most part, the knowledge of being able to grow anything other than an industrial standard rice here in the United States has pretty much been lost. And that's happened with a lot of our farms, with wheat, with corn. The knowledge of being able to grow it in a natural way or grow any of the old varieties on a large scale has been lost. There are plenty of individual gardeners doing corn. I don't know of many doing wheat, especially antique varieties. I've actually been trying to get a hold of some antique varieties of wheat that were known for being able to be grown here in Central Florida, and I can't find them. I know they exist. I have their names written down. I cannot get my hands on them. I've searched and searched. And as far as I can tell, the only place that actually has any of those varieties is a school in Israel. And they're not sharing. And that's because they have a program going on over there for wheat that is they're trying to make sure that they don't lose their wheat production. So they've collected antique wheat for something like 30 years, and they grow it and they keep the seed going so that there's a genetic variation and that these types are kept. I read a thing about a year ago where they had made a whole bunch of artisanal breads from all these different wheats and were doing taste tests where they were bringing in general public people that have no idea what these wheats are and going, here, tell us what you think about this bread that we made. And then kind of scaling as to how good they are. And they've got hundreds of varieties of different types of wheat. That's the only group I found that actually has the varieties I'm looking for. And I wouldn't even know where to begin to try to get them to send me wheat just to try to grow on a home scale. Not to mention the fact that I'd have to get with the U.S. government and get the appropriate paperwork to import the seed, which would probably cost me a decent amount of money, and it's not really worth it. Maybe one day I'll get lucky and find it at a trade or a show or something. Who knows? I do know one gentleman that did manage to get a hold of a variety of rice from the Philippines, and it's a highland rice from the Philippines that he's trying to grow here. I don't know if he's had any success, though, because I haven't seen him in probably a year or so, but he's got a what we consider a wet lot here, and what that means is it seasonally floods. It doesn't stay flooded, it floods with a heavy rain, and then, an hour or two later, it's back to normal, which might be a good place. But I honestly have no idea whether or not he actually went forward with doing it, if he had any success or anything like that. I'll have to check and find out. And best life, you want to try growing wheat? See if there is a good winter wheat for your area that you can try. I want to get away from the F1 hybrids when I do that and try to go with some of the more antique ones. A lot of the hybrids have lost their abilities to fight funguses, and I live in an area with a lot of fungus. But for your area, you might try some of those F1 hybrids, at least to start off with. Right now would probably be a good time to sow your winter wheat where you're at. So, generally speaking, you can find a basic seed for that by bag, usually around a 50-pound bag, which is probably way more than you need, at feed stores. Or you could contact your local extension office for the master gardeners, and they might be able to hook you up with people where they bought a bag and they're splitting it amongst themselves so that you're not having to buy a 50-pound bag. A lot of times the extension offices they'll have groups of people that will buy stuff like that want to do it on a home scale, or maybe just an acre or two, and they don't need a whole lot. That is awesome, Peter. Growing your own wheat, and experimenting with creating your own variety. When you're doing that, make sure you bring in other stuff periodically and see if you can't get some variants. Hey there, Josh. Thanks for coming in. Nice having you. One of the things I've been developing for myself over the last few years is my own variety of mustard, specifically for the greens. There's quite a few mustards that actually do rather well here, and I've been kind of trying to have it where they come back completely on their own, so that they seed at the end of the season, they come back and I don't have to replant. I've been pretty successful in this. I've had 5 different varieties that I've crossbred, and the weakest ones I cut out. And for at least the last 3 years, I've had them solidly come back on their own. A couple years, I had a few that came back, and everything's really basically from those original ones that came back from the 5 varieties that I had that crossbred. There are variants within it, like the ones that grow near my vegetable beds aren't that spicy. The ones that grow in my lawn are extremely spicy, and they will let you know. One bite and it will clear your sinuses out like that. Hi, Carol, Fishes and Loaves. If anybody doesn't know each other in here, please look each other up. Glad to have you, Carol. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I was supposed to be filming today, Carol, but the power company had different plans. They set up my front yard, start tearing it up, and there's way too much noise outside for me to try to film what I was supposed to film today. So I figured I'd just go live instead. There won't be a video out tomorrow unless I get lucky this afternoon and it cools off good and all that noise goes away for me to be able to film. Honestly, considering the fact that they're usually here in the neighborhood doing these projects till 7:30, 8 o'clock, I'm not thinking it's going to quiet down until after dark. Hopefully tomorrow they'll move on and I'll be able to film what I want, and maybe I'll be able to get it up then. But we'll see whether or not I can get one up, filmed and up in the same day. Usually it takes me a couple days after I film it. But there will be a video out sometime this week covering what I'm going to go for is covering making your own potting mix specifically for seed starts. That's the life. It's the exact same sound I have going on outside. They're putting lines underground so that when hurricanes come through here, we don't lose our power. It's kind of catch-22 because the water table here is so high that when these storms come through, we might be losing our power because it's shorting out underground. So that'll be fun to see how that works out. Generally speaking, power is done above ground here so that it doesn't short out. But my city got a really big grant from the federal government to put all our lines underground so that every time a hurricane comes through, we don't lose our power. So, catch-22 altogether. Is the flooding going to kill it? Instead, that happens annually. We don't get a hurricane every year. Of course, some years we get 3 or 5 hurricanes. So, kind of catch-22 there. Haven't had a hurricane this year here. And hopefully we don't. But the people in Louisiana, they got hit hard yesterday. I believe that storm came aground as a Cat 5. And that's no joke. I've been through a Cat 4. I highly recommend you leave as soon as they say Cat 3. Cat 1, Cat 2, the way our stuff is built here, Cat 1 is nothing. Cat 2, you start to get concerned. You might have, if you've got a lot of trees around your house, you might have some branches down. If you're unlucky enough for a straight wind gust or a microburst to hit your house just right, you might have some roof damage. Your gutters and stuff like that might get ripped off. As soon as they say Cat 3, pack up your stuff and leave. Don't chance it, because that's where it starts getting hit or miss, where the house next door to you is gone and your house is fine, and then 2 houses down, it's gone. It gets really weird that way. Yeah, Fishes, they were saying Cat 5 this morning on my morning news, that officially speaking, when it came onshore, it had become a Cat 5 just barely. of course, that's subject to change. Over the next couple of weeks, they might be calling it a Cat 5. They might downgrade it back down to Cat 4. You know how it is. You live in Florida, so you know exactly how that is. So, oh, and Courtney, or not Courtney, I'm sorry, Carol, sorry about that. Feel free to drop anybody's link in here that you want, including yours. So I'd like to encourage that. That way we all make sure we know each other. Pretty sure we all know each other, though. Yeah, that was a big storm, Hapsters. It was very, very big right before it went on shore. I was up at 3:30 in the morning watching it strengthen, and normally speaking, they don't strengthen at 3:30 in the morning. So that was going over some very hot water. Very, very hot water. Yeah, it's a good thing to get out of harm's way when the hurricanes are coming. As a Florida native, I will tell you, if you have even the faintest doubt, leave. My general rule here is as soon as they say Cat 3, I leave. I load up the family, I head inland. I'm only 16 miles from the coast. So that ain't slowing nothing down if they come in strong. We've had several of them cruise right through here. 2004, we had 3 of them crisscross relatively close to me to where every one of them affected this area. And it took years to clean up the damage that was done. So many houses had so many minor things done, and others were totally destroyed. New roofs everywhere. I spent years putting back siding and soffit and gutters on houses, and you got to wait for your insurance companies. You still got daily life you got to deal with. It was tough for like 3 years after 2004, and then 2005 we got hit by a couple as well, and then it kind of calmed down for a while. So, in general, always keep certain basics. Have a tote that has non-perishables just sitting there. Have water just sitting there. Like, be prepared because these things happen. If you can, get a generator. Learn how to hook it up. Never, ever run it inside or close to the house. You can kill your whole family with carbon monoxide. We lose people down here over that every year, where people hook up a generator in their garage and kill their entire family with carbon monoxide. Not only have it outside, but make sure you have it far enough away that the carbon monoxide doesn't rise up into the eaves, into your attic, and back into your house. General rule, 15 to 25 feet away from the house, where the wind is blowing in the opposite direction than toward the house. It's no joke, and I've rode out plenty of them where it just wasn't worth leaving. I've left and rode out ones that I would not have wanted been here when they came through. I lived in a mobile home for many years, and one of them that came through there, the only damage it did to my house was it broke a single window, and it ripped off one of my awnings. But the trailer that was one lot behind me and one over was completely gone. There was a frame sitting there, everything else was gone. 2 trailers down from that, it looked like it got hit by a train. I mean, it was just collapsed in. So, and those were newer trailers. I actually had a much older trailer that shouldn't have been able to survive that particular hurricane and was fine. And the newer trailers that were supposed to be up to code, made stronger, made of better materials, those were the ones that were gone. So it's kind of an odd thing when you know that the trailer that you paid $1,000 for is fine, but that guy just bought a $80,000 double wide mobile home and had it put in. That one's gone. He's still got to pay the bank. Because here in Florida, they don't like to insure mobile homes. So that guy not only lost his house, he still had a 30-year mortgage. So, yeah, that sucked. Peter, you have your own power room. Now that's the way to go. And Hapsters, if you ever get back down to Key West, make sure you go to Sloppy Joe's down there. They have the best key lime pies in the state, by far. They're getting really busy outside now. I've got 5 or 6 trucks out there now. It's always fun when the city's doing work. Peter, I wish I could say I could go off grid. At where I'm at now, it is literally illegal to be off grid. Hey, Jacob Downey, thanks for coming. Nice to see you. If any of you guys like gemstones, Jacob cuts them. He does a live stream once a week showing you how he's cutting them. Got a little joke section, plays games. Good live stream. You should know Jacob. I've known Jacob for 2.5 years, at least. He was one of the first people I met on YouTube. I guess I had been on YouTube for maybe 3 or 4 months when I met Jacob. Great supporter. He's been around forever. Also, I have one of his gems. I'd show it to you, but I have to go dig it out, and that'd probably take me a half an hour or more. But I have a very, very nice piece from him. I've been hand polishing it. Jacob, once I have that fully polished to the way I want it, I'm thinking about mounting it in a wooden staff. I think it'd look good on a staff that I've been working on. Yeah, Jacob, I think I've finally worked out all the bugs. Well, not all of them, but most of the bugs that I've been having about trying to go live. I'm on my 3rd new camera. And this one, the microphone quit working on immediately, but fortunately the microphone on my laptop is still working. So that's been a great deal of fun. I have a very old laptop that went down for a while, and fortunately somebody else was able to fix it for me. It was actually locked out of my own laptop because it decided my password was not my password, and I couldn't get in it for like 4 years. And a friend was able to fix that, and we got it operational again. But it was running on Windows 7, and Windows decided they were going to try to force me onto Windows 10 and basically tried to brick my computer. Everything on it stopped working properly. It was horrible for months. Trying to do videos, I'd make a video, and then I wouldn't be able to upload it because it just decided that it didn't want to have internet. get that fixed, and just around and around in circles. Most of my earliest videos were actually uploaded from my daughter's laptop for like almost a year because that was the only way I could definitely get online. And eventually, this laptop now runs on Linux instead of Windows. Windows has been completely wiped from this computer. And I'm still having problems, but nowhere near as many. It's not updating every 10 minutes. That drove me nuts with Windows. It updated constantly. And every time it updated, I had to basically relearn how everything worked because they moved everything around, changed my settings at their own discretion, and that drove me nuts. I'm not getting that with the Linux. It's much more stable. I've got a halfway decent program now for editing called Shotcut. It is way more complicated than what I had been using, so I'm still on a learning curve for that. Yeah, Jacob, streaming on Linux. Everything's Linux on it now. I can't do Windows anymore, and I can't afford a Mac. So Linux it is. Well, that's what it is. That's what I'm going to work with for a while. It's definitely a lot more stable than the Windows had been. Yeah, fishes, definitely get yourself a new camera. This one just plugs into the USB. It has a built-in microphone. It's 1080p. And the microphone works great the first time I used it. I actually filmed with this, and I did my jackfruit cleaning video with this camera. Microphone worked great. The very next time I plugged it in, microphone doesn't work. So, go figure. But, it's a $20 camera. I did try to return it through Amazon, and it is eligible to be returned, but I got to jump through flying hoops to return it to a particular place, and then they'll send it in, and it's, the camera's working, and the microphone on my laptop's working. I'll just go with it. Especially considering I've been trying to do lives for 2 years, and time after time after time, I failed. I'd get in one live, and then it'd be months before I do it. And I really want to do at least one live a week. At least one live a week, maybe two, because I'm trying to get my hours for YouTube, and I'm not really getting the hours. I get really good views, but a lot of my videos are short. And I want to keep them relatively short because I want them to be about one subject. I want people to be able to come to the channel and go, how do I do this? Find a video that covers that. And that's what it covers, is that subject. I don't want one of those. There's a particular gardening YouTube channel out there that annoyed me to no end because I'd end up going to his channel looking for information, and he'd have a 45-minute video to give you 30 seconds. Hapsters, last I checked, I was at 1379. It was up a little over 1700, but it dropped down seriously when I wasn't able to upload there for a while. So it's going back up, fortunately, over the last few weeks. It's been about a month or so that I've been able to regularly upload again. And the goal is 1 to 2 videos a week, and whatever short happens opportunity I have. And basically my shorts are just going to be whatever is opportunistic at the time, where I can grab a short video and upload it. And literally, as soon as I have a short, I'm going to upload it. Tuesdays, I'm planning on it being like a basics day, and I'm not going to be able to do every Tuesday. But most Tuesdays, I'm going to try to have it where I'm covering just a basic terms, basic how-to. And then later in the week is where I want to kind of like go over a particular plant. Like I just did the propagating lychee from seed, the propagating jackfruit from seed. So basically, that's the setup that I'm looking to try to do. Hamsters, I grow 2 different types of dragon fruit, and yes, I eat them. I also have a what's called a Peruvian apple cactus, which is a big, huge cactus, but the fruit on it on the inside is almost identical to dragon fruit, except it's not a climbing cactus. It's just this giant cactus. It's a night blooming cactus. It's just this massive thing, and it produces 70 or 80 fruit twice a year. I just got a whole bunch of fruit off of it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it'll probably be blooming again here in the next month or so, and then I'll get a smaller set of fruit during the winter. I have a purple dragon fruit, and I have a white dragon fruit. The white one I have, I believe, where was that from? The white one is from Vietnam. It's a Vietnamese white. The purple one, I don't know exactly which one it is. I think it might be a accidental crossbreed, because it's not really a purple one. It's not really a red one. It's an in-between. It's a purpley red inside. And it will stain your hands, but it tastes a lot better than that Vietnamese white. Although the Vietnamese white produces a lot more. I'm also trying to get me a yellow one, just for the fun of it. That way I have the 3 basic types that are grown in my area. I do have a video on the dragon fruit. I believe that was the 3rd harvest I'd gotten off of it. This year the dragon fruit didn't bloom, and I'm not really sure why. But the weather's been off this year, so that probably has something to do with it. I'm planning on taking the 2 types of dragon fruit I have now, which I'm growing in not ideal conditions, and sinking a 4x4 in the ground, and then building a configuration at the top so that they can run up the 4x4 and grow off of that. Right now I've got one running up the one side of my house, and the other ones are just running along the ground over on the side of the house. And I really want to move those into a better area, but the area I have selected for that has an old Ford truck on it, and that truck has got to go before I can put it in. So eventually the old beat-up truck that's sometimes in my videos will no longer be there. But to get it out, I've got to take a section of fence off and probably drag it out, because it doesn't even really have tires on it. That old truck ended up being spare parts to keep other vehicles going. So, yeah, it's not doing so good. So I have the white hamsters, and I have the purple. Well, it's a purpley red. It's not quite purple inside. It's not quite red. I think it's a strange crossbreed. A friend of mine had given me that one, and he had grown them from seeds from his own. So as far as I know, it doesn't even have a name, but there's possibly a variety out there that is close enough that it could be considered. Dragon fruit's fun. Hapsters, thank you very much for running my playlist. I greatly appreciate that. Very, very much. I do believe it is coming up on noon, and I got to start getting other things done. So I'm going to have to get off of here in the next few minutes. I greatly appreciate everybody that came by and said hi. Fishes, thank you very much for running everybody's link. I greatly appreciate it, Carol. Carol, message me through Facebook and talk to you about something else. Like, there's some plants that I'd like to send your way. So if you can, message me through Facebook. What do you mean by practice live on your channel? Hapsters, thank you very, very much for coming. I greatly appreciate it. Carol, yeah, message me. I'd be happy to. Now that I'm able to do this, I was on my first panel the other night. I went on Ron of Pacific Permaculture's panel for the first time. I had a great time. I was kind of nervous about doing a panel, and he made it really easy and just had it me and him, where me and him talked about gardening, and I really appreciated that. If anybody on here does not know Ron at Pacific Permaculture, you should know him. He's a great guy. He's been on YouTube for 5 years, and he hasn't even broke his first 1,000 subscribers. So if you don't know him already, please go over and check out Ron at Pacific Permaculture. Really nice guy. He knows permaculture very well, and he does great live streams and panels. He just inherited a house not that long ago, so he's just now beginning his systems on that house. It'll be fun to watch him break in this new place, and he knows permaculture really well, but he doesn't know gardening very well, so he could use a little bit of tips here and there on how to handle the various plants. He knows his permaculture really well, so it's going to be fun watching him, at least for me. You might enjoy it too. And Ron is a very, very supportive person. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised he's not here right now. He's probably at work. That's why he's not here. Aloha, Hapsters. You have a good day. And everyone else, I do believe I'm going to call it here and get myself something to eat and get some of the things I need done today before it's time to go get my kids from the bus stop. Thank you very much for coming. You have a great day.